We wanted to basically put a panel together for the youth here today to show you guys that entrepreneurship is not something scary. It's actually, you'll hear from all of our panelists here today how much fun they have with their own businesses and how you guys can get involved. As for Open DC, we do seek a lot of youth to get more involved with the organization, and we actually do have student membership options.
So I'm going to talk to you about three things. The first one is irrational risk, or seemingly irrational risk. The second one is failure. Failure that you might think would destroy your life. And the third one is accidents, and putting yourself in a situation where accidents are prone to happen. I'm going to tell you about these things while talking about myself. And I think these are three ingredients of entrepreneurship. You know, risk is something that is not common to immigrant communities, because when our parents moved here, the first things in their mind was building stable futures for you, for your future. So we've got a tendency to put ourselves in a situation where we reduce risk, take the safe course and path. And that's almost anti-entrepreneurial. So I remember when I was growing up, I had basically three options in front of me. First one was a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. I was very creative as a child, so I chose to be an engineer. And I remember that that was the scariest thing in my life, going from a very steady paycheck to all of a sudden having to generate my own income to be able to pay for my rent and my food. Very high probability of failure. But it went extremely well. So that year, I made 4 times the salary that I had made at Intel. It was very emancipating. It was a great experience. But every time I would do these crazy things, right? So seemingly insane. Every time I would do these shifts, people would say, "Are you crazy? Look what you're leaving and where you're going. It's so high risk." Failure. Failure. I mean, failure is not something that we generally think is positive. We rarely like to even tell people that, you know, I failed. I didn't do well. I wasn't a success. But without failure, your probability of success is much lower. It's those failures that lead to success, because the learning on going down the wrong path and finding out what you did wrong allows you to correct yourself. So as an entrepreneur, have to be very, very open and embrace failure. And the trick, as you learn, once you take the leap, is to fail quickly. Failure for entrepreneurs is like a cold. We all get colds. It's okay to get a cold. But you recover from that cold stronger, more immune. So failure is the other thing that I really want to stress. And the third thing is putting yourself in situations where accidents happen. And again, it's counterintuitive, accidents. Well, why do I want an accident to happen? Well, because some of the best things happen by accident. Go back in your own lives. Think of all of the wonderful things that happened which were completely unplanned and unintended. You took a certain course, a certain road, a path, and while you were walking along, you found something else that was interesting, and something amazing happened by accident. And if you look at the success stories, and I can name a lot of success stories that weren't the primary reason that that business exists, but because they were open to accidents happening and discovering and exploring, success followed. So accidents actually increase the probability of success. When I started my current site, rosie.pk, that wasn't the primary business that I started. After my first startup was acquired, I was thinking what to do next, and I came to the conclusion that one of the major issues that I had as a founder of a startup was my engineering costs. It was very expensive in the US to hire good engineers, and that was the majority of my expense when I started my business. And I had traveled back home to Pakistan a couple of times, and the cost of engineers, the total cost of a startup in creating software in Pakistan, I calculated, was 1/18 of the cost in the US, which meant that I could do a lot more with a lot less money. And having learned what I learned from my failure, I needed to get cash flow positive as quickly as possible. It wasn't about the eyeballs. It was about how much revenue I was able to generate and making sure that the business was viable. So I did something irrational, packed up my bags, moved back to Pakistan, and started a company. And I raised a small amount of seed funding from some amazing individuals. One of the first investors in Facebook, Reid Hoffman. How many of you have heard of Reid Hoffman? LinkedIn founder, amazing guy. Joe Kraus, Mark Pincus from Zynga. How many of you have played Farmville? Yeah, well, he's also an investor of mine. And they invested in me to go back to Pakistan and do what I was doing. And at that time, I wanted to build a social networking site before Facebook. So I started this site. It was a Muslim social networking site. And we started it in a small room in my house, my parents' house. And the business grew. It grew very, very fast. And when we started charging, which was about 6 months after we launched, in our first day of operations, we had paid for our entire cost. It was a magical moment. In the process of doing that, I needed to hire. And I asked people around me, well, how do you hire? And they said, well, in Pakistan, you hire through newspapers. So one ad in a newspaper cost $12,000. That was a lot of money for me. So I said, why don't I just start an internet site to put my own jobs on? So we put our own jobs on our site. Other people started to put jobs on the site. It grew, and it grew tremendously fast. And before we knew it, about 25,000 job applications were being processed by our website in Pakistan on the internet every single day. From a business perspective, we've grown 8,500%. There was a Harvard study done recently. We're the 12th fastest growing private firm in the country. And we're about to raise another huge round of investment. Very excited about that. And now we're globalizing our offering because of the cost advantage we have in Pakistan. It makes it very, very viable and feasible. So it's been a very exciting journey, but I think the recipe for the success that we've experienced leads back to a trail of taking almost irrational risks, of being open to and accepting a failure, and encouraging accidents to happen.